Hello. Yeah, my name is Marion Fröhlich. I'm here together with Tobias Haug, and we are here because our team was founded last year. It's called Design and Co-Innovation Center, and we're here to present a little bit our background story about our new team and about our new design services from SAP. I'm a strategic design consultant at SAP in Berlin. But traditionally, I come from the consumer world. I've been working 10 years in the consumer industry. So it's for me a new topic. I changed last year to go into the enterprise world. And so far, so good. It's been really exciting. It's a new journey. It feels very different, whereas at certain levels, it's still the same. And yeah, I'm happy to tell you more.
So my name is Toby Haug. My transition to SAP was more radical than Marion's because I actually studied biochemistry and my first job was in a zoo. So as the joke goes, started a zoo, ended a zoo. But in between, I was in consultancy, I was in sales before I transitioned to design. I've moved to Germany about 10 years ago and have been involved in product design at SAP as well as leading design teams for the last 8 years. So
yeah, a little story about what we do, very much simplified. We work at SAP, so that's a given. We also work hand in hand with customers and partners. So it's not like we do stuff all by ourselves, but no, we actually try to work together with them in order to build our technology and our experiences. And we of course also want to do innovation and do new stuff together. And we all do this in the context of enterprise design.
So some of you might know the name SAP. I mean, let's say I knew the name SAP, but I didn't really know SAP until I joined it and how big it is and what it does. So I thought, I mean, now have to watch out for the time, so I'm just going to skip through a couple of these. But I think to understand what we do and why we do it and how we do it, it makes sense to understand where SAP plays a role in the world. So 74% of the world's transaction and revenue, so really from countries, from banks, they flow through SAP software. Over 98% of the top 100 brands also use SAP software, so this is a huge amount of trust in from our customers to SAP. A little bit more on the fun side, I know, okay, German company, so I'm focusing on beer. We're in France, so I probably should have something about wine here, but 72% of all the beer worldwide is also produced using SAP as a backend. And for those non-alcohol drinkers, 65% of all coffee and tea production is also supported by SAP software. It's probably my favorite. 79% of the world's chocolate is also done by SAP's customers as well. But what does that really mean? Those are big numbers, but it really does have an impact on our environment and the people in the world. So 3 million tons of carbon emissions is just one of our products using or looking for energy management, helping companies become more efficient. That's close to 500,000 cars on the road that we are helping the environment with. Additionally, SAP, I don't know if some of you might have heard this, we've had a huge push into big data. The HANA database is one important strategy for SAP. But what does that mean? For instance, the Oncolizer is one project or one product from SAP that uses this database. But what it means is it can take such huge amounts of data that in the past, in order to figure out what the right treatment for certain cancer patients were, it was so time intensive that it cost about 100,000 euros, which made it a pretty exclusive treatment. Now with this technology, it brings, and speed, it brings it down to a cost level of about 1,000 euros per treatment, which means that this affects everybody, well, hopefully not everybody, but it affects people who are struggling with cancer and offers a new type of health care that was previously not available. Where did this all start from? One of our founders, one of our 4 founders, Hasso Plattner. Some of you might have heard of him in the past. He is also one of the sponsors of design thinking. About 12 years ago, He got in contact with Dave Kelly through his sponsorship, through his money, but also through his understanding. He started the first D School in Stanford. Later, he also established the D School in Potsdam, which were really the beginning of industrializing the design thinking approach. Additionally, about 10 years ago, he motivated SAP to start the transformation to bring design and design thinking into its organization. Why? Because back when SAP started, it was a small company. They really sat with their customers. They understood what they needed. They had to learn from the customers themselves. So this curiosity, this empathy was part of the DNA of SAP. SAP is now 65,000 people worldwide. We are, as I showed before, in so many different countries, in so many different markets. It's almost impossible to have that same small startup feel. However, through that distancing of from our customers, we also lost a lot of that empathy. So design thinking was the approach for SAP and triggered by Hasso Plattner to get us back in contact with our own customer base, with the users of our customers as well. So throughout that journey, I can speak over the break with my last 10 years of experience within an enterprise of establishing design and design practices. But now, about a year ago, we started the Design and Co-Innovation Center. This was a board-sponsored initiative which said, okay, we've, over the last 10 years, been having a transformation within SAP. Now is the time to bring that externally to our customers. A little bit later, we'll speak about the necessity, the business necessity also for SAP to do so. But the team itself is comprised of a little bit over 60 people. Our 3 locations is Berlin, Walldorf, where SAP is headquartered, as well as Palo Alto. In our team of around 60 people, we have over 20 different nationalities. We have a very big mix of skills, from strategy to different types of design, from visual new media design to the classic interaction design as well. And we also bring this together we try to typify the cross-team approach. Our focus is design, but what we do as one SAP. SAP has the traditional language and the traditional skills built up over the last 42 years of business acumen, as well as technology. That's not a problem. What we're bringing to the table and to our customers is really the design approach as well as the design skills. What we've also done is we've also created creative space. We've created outside of the SAP 4 walls a space where customers can come in contact with SAP on a project basis. This space, looking internally, looks something like this. Going back to what Eric said yesterday, it's not about the furniture, it's about the psychology of what we're trying to achieve in that space. And space also does have a huge impact in how we as a company are interacting with our customers. This type of space, this sort of space transformation is also happening within SAP in our big buildings, but this is really the first space that we're creating also to work with our customers in this space.
So yeah, enterprise and UX, or enterprise and design. I looked a little bit closer into this topic in the past year, especially coming from the consumer world. It feels like a little journey into the past, but at the same time, it's also very challenging because things are so much more complex, and it's a very different, I would say, area. Today, I think I want you to go a little bit back into the past. Think about 10 or 15 years ago. I don't know if you remember, but there used to be this time where we had computers at work, and they were so powerful. They gave us, like, all these things that we couldn't do at home. We would be more efficient, more effective, and we would go to work to actually do stuff with the computer. If I look at it nowadays, it feels like we have better products at home now than actually the computers or technology that we have at work, or better, like more productive experiences. And this is from 2010, but I think it's still valid that when you ask people below 30 or even Generation Y, everybody claims at least above 50% that they say they are more productive at home. and that their tools that they have are more productive and more efficient. And I think that's the big challenge that SAP has, that we all have to solve, actually. But this doesn't mean, I mean, the expectations are rising. So maybe we allow everybody to bring their own device and solve it that way. But that's not so simple, because if you think about it, all the software you want to bring to work, even if you bring your own device, you have to become part of an ecosystem. And there are certain security issues that doesn't allow you, in the end, to use different cloud services in order to be more efficient. And it feels really like this, trip to the past in order to, I don't know, even get your holidays accepted. Interestingly, the acceptance on the business side is growing. There is a design index, value index that was covering the past 10 years, seeing for, I think it's 10 specific companies, to see whether the design value actually helps them grow. And as you can see, it's 228%, according to stakeholders believing that they are more valuable. And I think that's interesting, in terms of what that actually means for the business context, because it seems like design and UX is becoming a business requirement. So even managers are asking us for more design. But the big question that stays in the room, I think, is what does this design actually mean, and what does design mean for you? What's good design? I mean, people say, I noticed that in the past year, people are very, very happy with the stuff we deliver, but then I see designers who are not satisfied with the quality of it. And I can see that we do a lot of improvement, but it seems like there's still a certain gap to what designers perceive as being high quality. So this question was also asked by Janine Rea. She was doing the Design Value Index report, and I think what they did actually is to come up with criteria to judge whether a company is design driven. And one reason or one criteria it was actually to see whether a design is integrated and the relationship towards the organization. So this is a model from Sabine Junginger. I think it's one way of explaining it. You have design as an external resource, not part of your company, maybe an agency. Then you have a peripheral model where it's part of the organization, but maybe you still have third-party support. Then you have the central model where you maybe already have a team, a certain dedicated, maybe even a department dedicated to design. And then on the left side, you see the integrated model where design is really, everywhere and, from top to down, it's on all levels. And when talking about design in this graph, I feel it's also important to mention this is not about design being part of a process. A lot of people see design as being aesthetically a reason to make something more pretty, but and then people say, oh, now it becomes part of the process. We just add it. We add some research and then we're done. But I think what the left chart actually means is that design becomes more, an approach, a thinking, a mindset, and it's part of a, strategic thinking on an organizational level beyond the traditional design function. So everybody is happy, right? We've seen investors are happy, the people behind the counter are happy, before the counter. We're in a world of access, and we can buy everything. Mostly everything we want, we can access and play with it and experience it. So there's actually, but still this big gap of, the guy in the back office, the guy in the enterprise world. Maybe not all the time, but I think everybody knows how difficult it sometimes is to be in this gray world and to, even if it's just for a few minutes a day, to enter your hours, how much you worked that day, or to, fill out any template. And I think it's time to actually, now that we maybe sort of have solved this side, it's time to actually move in here and make this also efficient and productive and fun. So that's the outside. Outside is done, but there's still a huge gap on the inside. And I extended the model basically to help me explain what I'm doing, because a lot of big companies we work with, they have amazing designers. They do amazing products. But why do they need us? And I think the reason for it is that if you extend the model a little bit, you can see there's still a huge gap on the IT side or the enterprise side. we still can, help people to grow on that side in order to become the new holistic design integrated organization, the 2.0 organization. But how do we do this? We do this by humanizing the software. Sounds like an easy task. It's quite challenging, but it's definitely something we do. We make better products. We build better experiences, better frameworks. We have a big design team and design processes within SAP. And we actually try to, go from the functional level towards, making something that is useful, that I really need, to something that is reliable, stable, I can count on it, I can use it whenever I need it, to something that is usable. So it's not only there, it exists, and I need it, but it's also quite efficient, right? I can do it in a certain speed. I can do it in a way that it's convenient and doesn't disturb me. But I think the last bit that enterprise software has to come to, and sometimes we're still talking on this level, I know. But I think it's also possible, same on the consumer side, to go to the pleasurable part. This is based on the Designing for Emotion from Aaron Walter. He's the head of UX at MailChimp. And MailChimp is also a newsletter service. And they managed to make it emotional, and they made it human. And I think one fair point is that, yes, if something is pretty, you experience it to be more, let's say, more efficient than it actually is. But if you have fun at work, and if you like what you're doing, you maybe don't spend a little bit longer at work. You still go at home at 6 or whatever. But maybe you are in a better mood, and that way we can actually prove that you're more productive. You like what you do. Your mind is different, and that changes how you work, and you're better in working that way. But then there is the other side, the customer. We did research last year, and we asked a lot of people, so what's the problem? Like, you seem not to be happy with SAP. And we asked them, how many of the screens that you have in your software have you been customizing? And I don't know if anybody has a guess what number this could be. It's actually quite high. It's 70 to 80%. And we asked him, how did you do this? How did you customize it and make it your own? And did you use some style guides? And the answer is often no. Did you hire some designers? Do you have some designers in your team? And the answer is also no. And I don't want to point at it, but I think it tells a little bit the story of how important it is that we empower our customers to do something meaningful and efficient with our software, that we cannot do this journey on our own. Even though we build better frameworks, they still have to adjust them. And we do this together, but we also want to empower our customers to do this. And basically these are the two things that we're trying to focus on in order to bring UX to the next level. Empower. One part of this is that we also, Toby mentioned it, we have several design services in our portfolio. And one design service I was involved in with the shaping and developing a little bit further, and that's about the empowering of our customers. It's called the UX Center of Excellence. We can discuss this in a break, but I think it's still very valid that we have to bring in UX to our customers, and that's on different levels, from like people and culture. It's hiring the right people, bringing in the right skills, but also building a culture of acceptance, like, hey, yes, design is important, and a creative culture of working together, like a team of one, tech team of designers and developers, and actually respecting each other and being open to this. Then, of course, there's the organizational side, the processes. You can add research. That's one way to do it, or you can just make sure that your structure on an organizational model actually supports this approach. And beyond this, of course, there's the infrastructure. I mean, we saw this, the furniture. I was like, why does everything has to be moving? But I think that's a fair point. I mean, you need to create this, this space that allows people to be different and to work more creatively. So I don't want to go into this. We heard about it yesterday as well, but we basically try to help people climb up this ladder step by step. And here we also noticed it's not so simple. It's not a linear approach. You sometimes have to walk, and you come by the same corner. You do projects a couple of times until they actually get accepted and go through, and it's a lot of work to really find a way through this jungle, step by step, one level up to the more UX in your company. Yeah, what does design mean for you?
So this is an interesting question, because I can tell you what design means for SAP. I've been living it for the last 10 years, but every time we go to a different customer, we have to start with this question. Because as we saw from the picture before, it's not a linear process. You have to pick people up where they are, but they have to know what the goal is. And design, as we talked about before, is becoming business relevant. People are taking notice of design and seeing it as a competency that they need, but how they define it, that's something that they have a hard time with. When we speak with customers, sometimes this goes very much in the direction of innovation. We have to be innovative. We're having market pressures that force us to do something different. Design and design thinking can help us in this. Sometimes it's very basic. We have software from SAP that we bought 30 years ago. It's still running. It's chugging along, but it's no longer usable. And the people using it, their expectations have changed. Help us solve that internally, and everything in between. We have large companies that have 300,000 people that are using it and design thinking and using the experience from SAP to say, help us redesign our organization. Come in and teach our management levels about design, about how to work in a more design-like approach. So the context, it's not just about having very specific people with very specific skills. I'm sorry, I know there's a lot of consultants here that would love to take on this role and say, just hire me and I'll solve it. But that's only a small part of the equation, because in order to establish design practice, each person and each team lives within a very, very specific context. And not just the mindset of the team, but the environment of the entire organization is important to know, as well as how far along in that journey and what have people tried to do before. The last part, which I think is also very, very relevant for large, complex, global organization, is the cultural aspect. Even within SAP, Hasso-Plattner, it's great to have a board-level sponsor who's pushing for this. This is wonderful, but you know what? He's more American than German at this point. And bringing design thinking from the US, from Palo Alto, all the way into Germany, that was a cultural shift. And we had to do some changes to the methodology so that it fit the German culture. But culture is more than that. Culture is also, SAP has its own culture within itself. So even if you look at SAP as an organization, there are different types of cultures within SAP that are grabbing different parts of design or design thinking that fits their needs for their organization. And these are all the things. It's not just Hasso saying do it one way. It's really for people to understand in their organization, their context, what they have to do to bring it to life. Yes, there are organizational models from have a central UX team and the different teams are reporting onto them. This is a great place for a lot of our customers to start, because it pools your resources, your competencies, and also focuses for companies that haven't done it before a type of consistency in design. If you look to the your right, the distributed model is also very good if you have different product lines, for instances, for different models, markets that are going at different speeds, to let them be a little bit more independent. And the hybrid model, somewhere in between, you're having the competencies embedded in the different product areas, but still coming together and still speaking with the central UX team that tries to guide them, at least in one branding or in one specific direction. Honestly, SAP has gone through all of these, so even this lives within a context. And I think this is true for every company as well. We have to figure out what their context is before we can even recommend to them what model makes sense for them. And this will constantly be changing. We had a huge dystopia of products for a while, so it made sense for a number of years to have a centralized model. Pull those things all together, start learning from each other again. Now we're getting into We were, for a while, also in a distributed model because now we were going into cloud-based solutions, and those were working at a different speed than, let's say, the older products from SAP. And now we're landed within SAP within the hybrid model.
Sometimes this feels a little bit too high level for people, so we came up with this chart. It's just showing a little bit about the flavors of this service. We call it UX flavors. It's more an internal word for this. But basically, when you start, what does it mean? How can you bring UX into a company? And it could be a 2-hour awareness session. We call it Leporello, because we developed a little format. It's a thing that you can fold up like a poster later, but you can go step by step through this one cycle of design. And it's just for creating these aha moments and experiencing it rather than talking 2 hours about what design could be. And this already has been quite mind-changing for a lot of people. Beyond this, it could be a hands-on workshop from like 1 or 5 days. That is more like, we want you to work together with you on a problem, but actually help you not only create awareness, but really experience it on a different level where you are engaged and you are doing and applying these methoden. And by that, you learn how to use them and how to bring it back into your team. The other thing could be a focus project. So that's, I don't know, maybe 3 to 10 weeks. And we actually worked with you on a concrete design problem, which is, again, here we also do it by co-innovation, and we do it together because we believe in this, learn from each other and learn with each other. The customized UX guide is just an example output that could be when we do a more intensive research project with you and building a vision. This means we maybe come in, do a kickoff workshop, and we spend a couple of weeks in your organization talking to different stakeholders, to your employees, in order to understand where you are, rather than asking you to point on, are you on level 2 or 3, but rather to really understand where you are and to build a UX-specific roadmap in a certain, you can do it in a booklet, like a guide, to help you create your own vision and to communicate that vision also into your company. Because what we learn is sometimes, you need to do it step by step. You don't get the buy-in in the first place. But when you do it by these, creating artifacts, people hear about it, hear the stories, they see it, and they cannot shift it, travel it away from their, desktop because it's a physical artifact on this, on your desk. Another example would be the Uphouse franchising. We've built the Uphouse, Toby showed it to you. There's a lot of interest in how did we do this, and I think the magic is less about the creative space, but more about this, this space that fits to your needs. And your needs can be anything from a tiny, small war room, a project-specific area that you just need for a certain period, or even a center of excellence, like a whole building, that allows you to communicate differently and to work differently. And I've seen a lot of different studios and spaces, and I think they're always very unique. So again, here, context is really important. The last thing is the consulting project that is part of our design service. Consulting, that could be, combine any of these flavors. Take some other flavors that we also have on the palette. But in the end, it's really about change management and trying to find out what you need and a long-term relationship. This is not done in a single moment. You see it, even SAP is still trying to go into a certain direction in different teams. But at the same time, we, as the design and co-innovation team, we help our customers to actually also grow with us and grow together our relationship. Our journey. We also thought, okay, we've been existing 1 year, basically, and we wanted to share a little bit about our experience so far, our journey. How do you prepare for yourself for this, and what were the experiences we had? As there's no one-size-fits-it-all, I think stories are always a way to maybe understand the complexity also about this service. We say it's a journey, not a destination. So that means when we talk about this service, we want to help people to pack their backpack. And then they are prepared, they can go and walk. But it's not about this, we want to help you to get to a certain state, like one step up, one level up. But rather, we want to prepare you with all the things you need So you will survive your own journey, and you can walk your own journey in the way you want to walk. And that's one way how we actually, collaborate.
And I'd add to that, as I mentioned, SAP, Hasso triggered design thinking within SAP 10 years ago. Are we done with that? Absolutely not. We still have a far way to go. So it is constantly changing. It's constantly a journey. One of our first projects that we had was an escalation from a very large company, global player, who was trying to sell their hair care products to hairdressers, hairstylists worldwide, using SAP software and using a web shop, more or less. After spending 3 million euros, I think it was, and then rolling it out, very proud, only 3 companies or hairstylists were using it worldwide. What did they do? Of course, they came straight to SAP and escalated and said, hey, your stuff is crap. And this was the first thing that we had as a team to deal with. And in the very first call with the CTO, with the head of their line of business for that type of hair care product, we just asked this simple question: did you ever speak to your customers? Did you ever go to the hairstylist? Silence. They said, okay, guys, first thing we're going to do, next week, pack your bags, we're going to go to London. And we took them to their own customers. What did they say? They came back with huge eyes. What did they see? They saw that most of these hairstylists, it's not just designers in this room, but a lot of hairstylists were using Macs. But the way they set up the system was not very Mac friendly. Very easy thing to set up. The other thing that they heard from their customers, hey, when I go home and I order something or I sign on to Amazon, I do it in a couple clicks. With this new web store, it took 5 days. Why? Had nothing to do with the software. It's just because they, within their own processes, they set it up that somewhere along the whole chain, there was one person that had to approve that, and that person only worked 50% of their time. So there are so many factors to how our software is being perceived. And so I think that's an interesting story. They walked away with a brand new perspective of what does perceived design and quality mean.
Be prepared to provide data. Oh, that's one too far.
Yeah, sorry. I talk too much. Yeah, so I also get the question by UX managers who are trying to set this up in their own companies quite often. How did you guys start? Should I start training people? Should I, roll some big initiative out company-wide, globally? And I said, no. I mean, you are working in a context. You have to understand that. But start locally. Start with a lighthouse project. Start with things that show value. We had to do this within SAP as well. It's the best way to convince your stakeholders yourself. And don't forget, a lighthouse has 2 meanings. The first one is it shows the way. It's a big beacon of light that draws the eye. But why are lighthouses even built? Because there's cliffs and rocks in the water. So lighthouse projects also help organizations understand not just where to go, but what to avoid.
So be prepared to provide data. One thing, of course, is measurement. It's surprising to me that I hear a lot, let's do research, let's check out the user needs, that's new, that's user experience. I learned it in an integrated way, and there's no user needs only approach, but it's also about be prepared to provide data. I mean, it's a very big thing, different thing if you want to change a click rate or if you want to get more customers, right? It's a very different design challenge also for us. And it's also essential for doing this that we provide data. We saw it yesterday when Eric showed the methodologies. I found it quite valid to actually always put the business objectives in or certain measurements. And I think that's the same for us. We develop this UX calculator. Maybe it's also not calculating all of it, but it's a good tool to actually engage the conversation and to prove in the first place what this could actually mean for a business. And you get the buy-in, you start it, and you start working with each other, and then they see the value. And it's more like an icebreaker to use it, but of course also for people to protect themselves and show data because people are asking for it, right? We all want to measure our success. But then again, it leaves the question, there are certain things you can't measure, and that's the part where it gets interesting. I mean, how do you judge your first kiss? I don't know. How do you judge, the sun going down? How do you judge it? You know, whether that's really impactful or meaningful or human or emotional. Do you do it by color? It's today a little bit more red than yesterday. Is it time? So it's just one way of getting closer to the answer. But experience, it's also difficult to judge it in a certain way. There's also this extra level that I showed in the pyramid. I think that's something we should be aware of, that there's something beyond this hard numbers.
So the messy middle, and messy middle in quotes, that's me. And this is something that every single company has. I think yesterday we also came up Intuit as a great company. And I love speaking with Intuit, and this quote actually comes from Karen in Intuit that said, you can have this executive sponsor, and they did, we do at SAP as well. You can have a grassroots effect. So, hey, put it in the hands of people. Do those lighthouse projects we talked about. People get engaged. They want it. And what happens? It still doesn't work because there's a messy middle of middle management that blocks. So we've started also within SAP specific trainings for middle management so that they understand what their role is in this whole new dynamic. That they still understand what sort of power they have, but their power is more of an enabler rather than a decision maker in some cases. But don't forget the messy middle. Don't just think it's going to happen on its own or happen from top down. Pull everybody throughout your organization with you on the journey.
We design with customers, not for customers. I mean, we hear this. I think the most interesting story for us, or sometimes these are the extreme moments that our team has to still deal with, is this when you are designing a certain project for 3 months, you're working really hard time, and then in the end you have the presentation with a big car company, and you present it to the top level, and they, at that single moment, it's not available. It's not available because in that single room, there's not this network connection. So what do? You present it anyways. But the amazing thing about this is that it got positive feedback, and that's because we were working together with each other, and they loved the way we worked, and our tool sets, our methodologies, our approach, and they were so curious to work more with us, to learn about this and to bring this into their company in order to build this expertise on their own. So I think what this means is 2 things. Let's learn together, like don't do it in silos, but at the same time, it's also beyond deliverables. It's also this journey that we go together.
And I'll add one story to that. We had a big chocolate manufacturer in Switzerland. I can't say names, right? And we actually had a design challenge. They put us in front with 3 other big companies and said, okay, here's one challenge. Design it, come back in a couple weeks, and we'll choose which one of you gets the big contract. And what ended up happening, we actually said as a team, we need to talk with your users. We want to do it with you. And if you don't want that, if you just want to, do it the regular requested way, then we'll step out. That's not the way we work. And with a lot of grumbling, they said, okay, yeah, go. And we went out. We went into their, I think it was a bottling manufacturer. And at the end of the happy story, we got the contract. But why? Everybody had great design at the end, but we had the people from their company join us in that meeting and said, we want them, they listened to us, and we were part of the solution.
So yeah, this is a few insights of our journey. We're still on it, we're still going. Happy to talk more about it later in the lunch break, or later in a few minutes. Why do we do all this? I think of course it's for money, right? That's why we do this. I mean, not for our money, because we want people to save money and be more efficient. But I think why we also do this is we do it for the employee. I mean, that's my passion. I design because I want to improve the world. I think the most amazing thing about being a designer is that you can make stuff that people use in the end, and that makes their life more successful, or more meaningful, more joyful, or gives them even more time for other stuff. The other thing is, of course, it's packing your backpack. It's this competitive advantage that we want to give our customers to, be able to grow and to move on their own. And then the last thing is we cannot do it on our own. We can only do it. We are in the ecosystem. We have technologies, but we only can do it together with our partners to really go with this journey and to ensure that SAP experiences is high quality and completes or fulfills a certain meaning. This is a nice quote at the end of the day. People won't remember what you said or did. They will remember how you made them feel. A little bit unusual for a techie company, but I think it's actually where we have to go. I don't think there's a big difference between consumer and enterprise. It's all about us. And if you are in conversations, it's all about how you make them feel, and people get forgiving. They become forgiving in relationships. So if our software is more human, you actually see us, the company, the people behind the scene, behind the software, and that builds over time a certain relationship because every detail is important, and that's at some point, even if something goes wrong, you still work with us or you still want to be with us because you see this human part behind it, and you trust on our relationship. And I think that's something, I try to strive for, but something I really wanted to share. Thank you.
Any questions?
Hi. So thanks for the presentation. I also work in UX, and so I agree with you on most every level. But also I'm hearing this presentation more or less for the last 6 years that I've been working in a similar way. Do a lighthouse project, do these things to convince the management, all this. And I'm seeing, especially also from SAP, I'm seeing these great innovative programs and projects, and I'm hearing about design teams, but I'm hearing the same story for years. And what I am wondering, not in a bad way, in an interesting and good way, I'm wondering what does need to happen for this organization or any large organization that we can stop talk about these little teams that do great stuff or these cool lighthouse projects, but really having it as a core of this organization such as SAP. Is it a matter of amount of people, or that's what I was wondering throughout the presentation.
So what I would say is what I didn't talk about in this presentation is how SAP is handling design internally. This is really the Design and Co-Innovation Center, and our experience is going out and preaching the same story that we all probably in this room have heard many times. I could show you how design within SAP has been growing and been embedded, and we're also not done with our journey. But I think one thing is this story that we might be hearing 1,000 times over, we've got to keep at it because it is the volume and it should not be a hype. So for me, if we heard a lot about design and then a couple of years later we don't hear about it anymore, for me that's design. I actually like the fact that we as professionals keep beating on that drum, keep creating those sorts of stories because that's what the outside world needs to keep hearing. Within SAP, there have been year to year, even my team, we were board sponsored a year ago, 60 new headcount. That's also an invest that shows how serious design is becoming in the business. This is also happening, IBM, I believe, in the US is just creating a design space similar to our App House, and also saying they're going to invest several hundred, they want to hire several hundred designers. These are all stories that build up in volume to big businesses and the business decision makers. So I think we as professionals hear one thing and we hear it over and over, but I think that those stories, that drum, is only starting to be heard on upper levels. But within SAP, we've been investing not only just more and more in the people, in the talented people that we're pulling in, but we're also giving them more say. Even within the developments, I think yesterday a couple of questions came up, design on the ground floor in our development processes, designers and design also takes more and more relevance. I'm not going to lie and say that we're driving the show. That's not the case. But at least we even have ways of scaling design to our development organization, of getting them involved in the design process as well. It's no longer an external source of, we've created something, now make it pretty, but really from the beginning to be involved. And that's also a big step as an organization. But
I think
talk about that.
Just to add to it, I think it's just a very slow journey. I mean, companies don't change in a click. And I think I can tell that people are curious, that they are actually asking us, wow, how did you do this? I was told that it's really difficult to do a standard project within SAP, and then we did like a co-innovation project. We worked very, very in a small team together with others, and it became a great success story. They're making a product out of it, and that wasn't the original plan, and that was done within a couple of months. So I feel there is hope, and it's changing.